Well, good morning, everyone. That's awful loud. So this is the front end, or the beginning of our journey on end-to-end testing with Cypress. I think you're going to see some exciting things. How many people are using Cypress now? Red, cool, isn't it? I've been speaking for a lot of years, so I don't mind interruptions or catcalls or anything. So speak up. It's not gonna mess me up much. I'm Denoncourt, and I work for SimpleThread. I like to brag and say I'm a senior programmer at SimpleThread, but the reality is I'm not the smartest developer, not the best developer at SimpleThread. I'm just the oldest. So I like to say I'm the senior programmer. So why am I here? These are a couple of books that I wrote, and this one here in particular, that doesn't really show up well, does it? This System X to AS Runner migration that Amazon wants $140 for. I can get a signed copy of that for you for $2 if you're interested. Yeah, maybe you could try. That'll work. I also had my 15 seconds of fame 2 years ago. I wrote a blog post called I'm Getting Older in Tech, and it just went nuts. There was over 100,000 reads on it, full reads on it in a short time. For that reason, I wish this pointer worked. For that reason, InfoQ picked it up. They liked it, and they had me do a presentation at QCon in 2017 that was fairly well attended. That presentation, for any of you that are getting older, it's still available on InfoQ.com. I've been talking about testing for years. I was a full-time writer for a number of years, and I really tried to bring Java to the mainframe community, to people that were old like me, so that they could have jobs when they were my age, that I am now. So for years, this is actually a slide from a presentation I did in Sweden in the early 2000s. And you can see, I like to say that I started doing unit testing when Kent Beck and Eric Gamma got off the plane where they wrote JUnit. Apparently they wrote JUnit on a plane flight. So I like to jest that they handed me a 3.5-inch diskette and I immediately started testing. It was close to that. And so, one of the things I was suggesting to mainframers that pick up a new language and by all means use unit testing. JUnit for Java, of course, and JS unit. Is this even alive anymore? PHP unit, and IUnit was actually one that I wrote for RPG development. I gave this presentation to someone at work, and he said, Don, where's your test pyramid? So I added this slide, and he said, no, you idiot. You need the test pyramid to show where end-to-end fits in. So I added this slide. And I said to him, I said, this is how pyramids can fit end-to-end. He said, no, that's not what I meant. So apparently I'm an idiot, but you guys aren't. You guys know you've seen the test pyramid too many times. I just thought I didn't want to put another test pyramid on another presentation. At the bottom end of the pyramid is unit testing. At the middle part is integration testing. At the top is E2E testing. And the suggestion is you do a little bit of smoke test E2E testing, and you do a little bit more of integration tests, and do a lot of unit tests. I love unit tests. How many of you are doing E2E testing? Excellent. For unit tests, you probably all are doing unit testing. And it works real well. It proves that individual things work. If I take this analogy too far, I cycle and so my legs are in shape. I lift weights and swim and hit the heavy bag, so I'm okay here. This is really, I need more unit tests for that because it doesn't work so well with me, as you all are finding out watching my presentation. But we do unit testing, and I actually love to unit test because I think I have more velocity. We're not really talking about unit testing today. We're talking about E2E testing, and E2E testing is painful. If anybody in here thinks that E2E testing is painful, raise your hand, and then go like this, and go like this. And what ends up happening is it's so painful that you do rage quit. You say, I just don't have time for that. I was on a C++ team at the wonderful Circuit City years ago, and for a while there I was on a E2E testing job, and it really was painful, and I hated it because they were so brittle. It took so long to do, it was so brittle, and any code changes were made, we had to change it again. And then, fast forward 10, 20 years or so, and I'm working on Ruby and Rails, and we use Capybara, and Capybara uses Selenium or WebDriver behind it. And it's a pain. And I really kind of like doing the Capybara test, but usually I'd only end up using it for the rendering of HTML, for dynamic rendering of HTML. For the JavaScript, I never really trusted it. It was just too painful. So I see some people's heads are nodding. So I want to introduce to you a game changer, and that's Cypress. They really have changed the game. And now for my sales pitch slides, Cypress gives you consistent results. You don't have the flakiness. With your Selenium style tests, things are flaky because the way Selenium works is basically it's an API. Selenium was written in Java of all things. You'd think it'd be written in JavaScript. So it was written in Java, so it supports multiple languages, and it does API requests to the browser, and the browser adheres to those API standards. And then it's basically synchronous, but who writes synchronous front-end code anymore? Everything's asynchronous. It's really squirrely. You want your test to be consistent every time. Automatic waiting. I had a video version of this. I had problems getting it so it was licensed for replay where he was twiddling his fingers. It was kind of funny. But yeah, the problem with, when you talk to folks, one of the people on a team that I'm aware of, they still are using a Cypress or Selenium-based test. And what they do is they code in waits. They'll wait, they'll retry. Oh, it didn't work. It's probably okay, let's try it again. Oh, it's probably okay, let's try it again. Well, that's just nuts, that you're spending your time writing code to get around the Selenium issues. Well, Cypress, as we'll see later, it has automatic waiting. Debuggability, isn't this who you really want to be when you code? But you can't be this guy unless you have enough data. If you don't have the data available, you can't debug. With Selenium, if you have an issue, you get a browser stack trace. Now, I'm a half-decent coder, but I'm not about to be able to code a browser. The browser code is crazy, and your code that is not even listed in that browser stack for the longest time. So it's just nuts to get started with it. You kind of basically, hey, it don't work. Let's figure out what went wrong. Network traffic control. Hey, this is one of the. I used to watch this growing up. Actually, it was in black and white, so we didn't have the color. It was sad. But you have network traffic control, and we'll actually see some of that in the live demo. Time travel, isn't this great? And you'll see that as well. How can you go back in time? Your tests don't work. You have a failure somewhere. You have to go back and manually reproduce that. You go to your browser or what have you to get back to the point where the test failed so you can see you don't have enough of a stack. So you have to go back to the point where your test failed and try it and try it and try it until you get to the point where you can reproduce the failure that happened in your test. Come to find out it was just a timing issue, whatever. With Cypress, you have time travel. You can go back. What they do, and you'll see this explicitly, is as your tests run, every single test, it saves the DOM stack. It saves the full DOM, which is nuts. So as you'll see in the test runner, you can click on a test, and they actually use an iframe, and in the iframe, there's your app sitting there. And it restores the app at that version. You can open up developer tools and query things. It's just very easy to do. Selenium, you can't do that because that browser is not available. It's running, you can see it, but you can't go up there and write, and pull up the developer tools. So you'd be able to do time travel. There's another one from my childhood from Mad Magazine's Spy versus Spy. So we have spies, stubs, and clocks. I'm not going to demo spies, but you basically know what spies are, just to see if if a section of code ran and if it returned particular results. Stubs, I will show that. So some folks move to Cypress because the stubbing is so powerful. You can stub network requests, and I'm actually going to demo that. And clocks are neat. And a lot of applications have set timeouts or whatever, or based on time. Well, you have Cypress. First of all, understand that Cypress is all JavaScript. It's a JavaScript-based framework. Also, another thing I want to point out is Cypress, because it's all JavaScript, it's not for JavaScript apps. It's for HTML. It's for web browser apps. I've done websites of RPG backend. I've done websites of PHP backends. I've done websites of Ruby and Rails and Groovy and Grails. It doesn't matter. If you're putting a front end there and need to test functionality, you can use Cypress to do that testing. You have to write your tests in JavaScript, but understand that for the most part, especially I went to the speaker dinner last night, oh my gosh, some of the people here, they are just so freaking smart. I mean, they work for Walmart or Netflix or whatever, and they really are JavaScript head cases. And I am not. I'm here to say that. One of the guys that works with me is going like this. He agrees with me. Yeah, it's actually, if you don't do much JavaScript at all, it's a great place for you to start to use ES6 if you want and play with certain features of the language without getting complex. Screenshots, snapshots, and videos. I mentioned earlier about the snapshots that they actually store DOM snapshots of every test. So you can go back and look at that and see and inspect things and debug things, see what happened. When you run in Circle CI, I use Circle CI, so instead of saying continuous integration or CI, I say Circle CI. So whenever you run your CI and you run Cypress in your CI, it creates a video. And we'll see that. I'm going to show that to you. It's pretty neat. And you can do screenshots as well. This actually, I wanted to find an outdoor theater, and I found this one, which is from where I grew up in York, Pennsylvania. Give you an idea of the quality personally. When I was a teenager, I had a van, and we would get there about 12 o'clock with a cooler full of beer, and we'd go into the exit, and we'd back in through the exit, and then go watch the movie, and drink beer. Automatic reload. Don't you want to have do-over? We'll see that as well. I want to redo your tests. So a little bit about my successes. I started using Cypress in 2016. Actually, there's a speaker at the end of the day I really would recommend his presentation. It's John Athide, and it's a UX presentation. John Athide has a master's degree in architecture, and he's really applied that well to UI. Really interesting analogies there. And he was the one that developed UI for this. It was really extremely sophisticated. And it was written in Angular, and you'd think you'd use Protractor, but there was a guy on the team I was with at that point that he actually contributed to React. He was real, we asked him to rate his skill level a bunch of languages, and he didn't have much languages that he had skills at, but he got to JavaScript. He said, I'm an 11 out of 1 of 10. And I told him, I'm going to prove you wrong someday. So, okay. And maybe some of the other speakers here could prove him wrong, say he's just a 10, but I couldn't. And he said, we need to use Cypress for this. Sure, Protractor is not bad. It's better than using WebDriver or Selenium directly. But for those you may not know, if you don't do Angular embeds Protractor, which is on top of WebDriver that's supposed to assist in some of those timeout issues. He came in and he developed the apps, and I picked up and got psyched on Cypress at that point. This was actually pre-beta 2 years ago. Last year, I submitted a presentation, and for the most part, SimpleThread puts it on. But I remember Justin saying, he said, it's not even in beta yet. How can we do a presentation on a tool that is not even in beta? We don't know if it's going to gain adoption. Sure, it's because I did a lot of the demos I'm going to do today, and he said it's pretty cool, but is it going to be adopted? Is it going to be a lot, who's going to happen if they run out of funding? And then just so I didn't get picked for the presentation, but they right before the conference they went out of beta, so it was pretty cool, and they went into beta last year. This year, now they're out of beta. They're actually a company where you can, later on, if folks are interested, I can talk about the pay for Fusion. Almost all of the actual Cypress that I'm showing today is free. It's open source. It will always be open source. There's a team of 30 contributors that are not part of the Cypress organization that are making changes to it as well. So it's really caught on. I also use Cypress. was at a company that we went and refactored code, and there was this guy that it was a multi-million-dollar Rails app, and it was written, and it had classes that 2,000 to 4,000 lines of code. They had functions of hundreds and hundreds of lines of code. So it's just crazy. And I tell this to people, and they say, what kind of idiot programmer was that? Well, I'll tell you what kind of idiot programmer he was. He was a guy that went to 2 different Ivy League schools and who's now a millionaire because of this Ruby and Rails code that he learned how to write when he decided to write the app. So yeah, it's good code, it's just hard to maintain. So he had no unit tests at all in Ruby and Rails. So what I did is I used Cypress, and I wrote Cypress tests. They had a script that they had people to test their app. It was pretty sophisticated, and it took me a long time to figure out how to do it manually. So what I did is I scripted all that with Cypress, and then I turned on code coverage in Ruby and Rails on the server, and I could see what lines of code are running. Then I started to refactor the Ruby code. What I'm doing now is the current project, we have adopted 10-year-old Rails applications, and my joke is there's 9 to 12 Rails apps, and that's kind of a bad joke because it seems like every other week my boss says to me, or my supervisor says to me, he says, there's this Rails app I didn't tell you about that we use, or there's this gem that I didn't tell you about. So it's just nuts, and there's no testing. Also, there's really little documentation. So the quickest way for me to get tests for my Rails application is with Cypress, which is writing in JavaScript. Cypress is going nuts. There's been, I think, 2.5 million downloads so far. So the adoption is crazy. And there's a lot of big organizations today that are using it. So as my father would say, enough of this happy horseshit. Let's get started. So let's do some coding. So the first thing I'm going to start with is the kitchen sink demo. And I'm going to make a directory. I'm going to end up going to Kettler, which is a website that I wrote 10 years ago. I'm going to make a website called Kettler USA. I should have practiced doing this standing up. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is Cypress. Oh, wait a minute. Damn it. I forgot a slide on how to install Cypress. Wait a second. Oh, here it is. That's it. npl install Cypress. Hopefully that'll show up on the video. So once you install it, it's amazing to install. They wanted to make it really easy for you to get started. So I just created a new directory. I'm going to do Cypress. I need to increase this a little bit. And this is called the test runner. I really wish this thing was working. This is what I get for using a cat. It actually does show up a little bit. So what it did, I just created a directory, but once I did Cypress open, it helped you out, and there was a little message that came up saying, hey, we added these. This is actually the kitchen sink. So every time you start a Rails application, open your Cypress. If it doesn't find a folder called Cypress, it creates one for you. And this is the standard folder structure. Fixtures, which I'll actually demo that. And the integration, they had /examples, and of course you want to organize your tests. Well, I have a project in Git, which we call integration tests. It's all Cypress tests, and it's for each of those 9 to 12 apps, so we can segregate things. So all things are in one place. If you're doing React or Vue or Angular development, you have your Cypress right in your app. Because there are ways where you can do unit testing with Cypress or certainly integration testing. So it may work well to put it in there. But if you're working with other apps or multiple apps, put it in a separate project. It just makes sense because the entry point is a URL. So I'm gonna run this test, and automatically it opens up I could have changed it, but there was an option. You can test it with Chrome, or you can test it with Electron. So it's running all these tests. And while those are running, Kitchen Sink is amazing because it has all kinds of examples. Apparently with the Kitchen Sink, they say all the different actions or the commands that they have available have an example in the Kitchen Sink. There's a lot of stuff here that I haven't used, but this is your standard test. You can have context. Mocha users here, Cypress is based on, uses Mocha, so it uses the Mocha testing framework. So we just ran actions. And if I go back to here, if I click on any one of these, I can see every single test it ran. Let's look at this type. And the neat thing is I can inspect, and that full DOM is available. Notice with this type, it gives you as much information as they have at the time that this test ran. So let's make a change here. Let's break it. Instead of a fake email, let's use a real one. That took 4 seconds. I don't know if you noticed it. This whole test took, it's taken like 15 seconds, but for that one simple test, it took 4 seconds. What happens here is, the cool thing that Cypress does is in your it blocks and your test blocks, everything runs as a promise, in that it's going to continue to try to check to see if this action email is set to the fake email, and to continue testing. That's the exact sort of thing that a lot of people end up coding in their own apps with Selenium. They'll just keep retesting, retesting, retesting. It does it automatically for every single test, and it really helps. The other thing is it does it automatically. It will time out, but the timeout, I think, is 4 seconds. And you can change that easily. Anytime you need to add a longer timeout, you can add it per command, or you can add it globally. So we added that fellow. So now, basically every test is you do sci.visit, you put your URL to your website, then you say sci.get, and then you do the action. Type, click, select, focus, and then you can do assertions. The odd thing is about my Cypress code is that I don't do that many assertions, which almost doesn't make sense, except that if you do sci.get to get a button or get something, and you fill text in there, and you click, and you're moving forward, and the website's moving forward, you're saying go to this button, go to this link, click it. You're testing. Your assertions is that the thing actually does exist. So now I'm going to go on to Kettler and do live tests of Kettler. Justin said this morning about the Wi-Fi being squirrely. I'm not too worried about that, and if Selenium developers would never do a demo up front if the Wi-Fi what didn't work well, because it runs slow. And if the Wi-Fi doesn't work, I'm just going to go to my hotspot. And I've tested it works well. It's just crazy that Cypress is set up for its automatic waits, that if the long waits of my cell phone slow connection works. So I'm going to, actually, let me delete. I'm going to delete all those examples. I do this for most times that I have a Cypress app. I delete all the examples, even though they're neat. But there's a Git repository for them. You can always go back and look at them. I think they're accessible via the website as well. So now I'm going to you need to call it .spec.js. And this is standard for Mocha. And then you can use, when I first started using Cypress, my ES6 wasn't that good. So you could use, your your ES5. Let's do add to cart. Okay, and I'm going to do site.visit. You're never supposed to do live demos because things always go wrong. Whatever, I find audience kind of enjoy when the so-called expert has issues go wrong. I remember one of the times I was doing a Java presentation, I was doing a live demo, and I keyed a keyword in incorrectly, and everybody in the room and the compiler, all of them, even the compiler, was laughing at me, and I had no idea what was wrong. I was looking at it, and they continued to laugh. Well, I misspelled the keyword public. I missed the letter L.
Don, can you make it larger for the older people?
Thank you. On behalf of the older people. Okay, yeah.
While we're interrupting you, I was curious. I was looking at the website for Cypress. I saw there's like paid plans versus free plans and stuff like that. Does that have anything to do? Like, is everything you're showing?
Everything I'm showing is the free plan. The paid plan, basically all the services of Cypress work free. What the paid plan does is they have a dashboard, and the dashboard kind of aggregates your data. If you have the paid plan, when you run your tests, it shoots information, those screenshots and all the data information about your runs. They shoots it to their site. And then the dashboard allows you to track your tests. And I think they have 70,000 paid customers now, which is great. They also had $5 million in venture capital given like in June. So they're doing well. One of the things that they're planning on doing in the future is because you have all these snapshots and these screenshots, they're going to be able to, if you have a test that ran fine last week and a test that failed this week, they're going to be able to compare those DOM snapshots and say what DOM had changed to give you more information. So there's some sophisticated things that they're going to be able to do with that aggregation of data.
When you use Jest at all, how does that differ from Jest's snapshot tool?
I haven't used Jest. My understanding is Jest is the way to go now. Yeah, when they wrote this, when they initially started this, Mocha was the thing. And Mocha is pretty darn good. And what I like about Mocha is that it's real similar to the RSpec with the testing framework for Ruby and Rails. Oh, I know some of you saw me do that. And thinking, yeah, he is an idiot. But the Cypress is pretty darn good for helping you with your development. Their error reporting is pretty nice, and they give you pretty good suggestions. Oh, did you see that? I saved, and it immediately started to run the test again. So that's your do-over. That's pretty neat. So you can be writing your test, and you do the save, and it goes ahead and reruns it, which is real handy. Well, description. Actually, it did take that, didn't it? It actually did run with description, which is, so they coded for people who don't remember things. So apparently I have an error. This is pretty neat. So I have an error, and actually I think I know what that is. I wrote this Kettler USA website over 10 years ago, and I used jQuery, and jQuery had special features for the Microsoft MSIE, and that's no longer works. So let's go see what their website says. Copy this. Oh, uncaught exceptions from catalog events. Look, so I can catch this. So I'm going to copy this and paste that in there. So it's pretty handy, all the help that they give you. Their error messages are great. So here we are. So I need to move forward. Now, so now what I want to do is I want to search for something. And what I used to do when I first started doing Cypress is I would go to the site that I was working with, and I would right mouse, and I'd go into Inspector, I'd look at this guy, I'd right mouse, and I'd say copy selector. Well, first of all, you can do that from here. Look, there's the DOM changing. So I can right mouse here, inspect, and copy the selector. Then over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say get, and then paste it. Well, you know, it turns out that there's a new feature that came out, I don't know, fairly recently, where you click on this playground, and then you click on your element that you want to work with, and it copies it up here. And if you click this, it shows what that is down in your console, which is pretty handy. Then if you copy this, you click on that fellow to do the copy. There's your whole command. So what I want to go get the guy, then I'm going to type 3 star TT. And I can go to the button and click it, but you can just put in, there's a number of keystrokes that you can do by just putting the curly braces in. Oh, now did my browser go down? I mean, my network go down? I think it did. My Wi-Fi is down. I was warned. I think I'm going to punt on this test and go to my next test, which is actually local.
While you're having some network issues, I'm curious, I was just taking a look at the GitHub issues. One of the things that we found when we first piloted or started investigating concept Cypress for our India testing, it didn't work behind the corporate proxy.
Oh, okay.
That bug is still apparently waiting as long as for the last year, a little bit longer than that. And we also see additional proxy issues
Okay.
being opened up. Is there any development of that, or have you seen?
I haven't seen that hit. Did you put a bug list for that?
I can get you the bug.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to punt. We had this coding demo for Kettler, so we actually write some testing from scratch, but I'm going to go in and show you some live code for stubbing, and that's going to work fine because it's all local, because I have my multiple servers running locally. So the architecture, it executes, Cypress is written in JavaScript, it executes in the browser. So because of that, it's not using Selenium to communicate with an API via the browser, and they can do a lot of things that Selenium can't do because they're inside thing. They have access, and they actually have more access than maybe you do with your actual JavaScript application because they know the internals of the browsers. So they can do some really interesting things. They can actually run, they have a command for EX called exec to execute commands on your machine, which is handy. I've used that before to run Rails rake tests to seed the database before tests. So there's some interesting things that they're able to do, and because of that, you're able to do your stubbing, and that's what I'm going to show now. So I'm going to Control C here. I'd like to go back to that if I can finally gain access to Kettler again. Oh, maybe it's up. Let me open it up again. Okay, so the site came up and it went to the page. Kettler has stuff, they have some stuff that costs $5,000, $10,000. So whenever I would test the site years ago when I wrote the app, I would always use, they call them table tennis balls because ping pong is a trademark that's a product they didn't sell. So I always buy the cheapest thing, which is ping pong balls. And if I forgot to delete the order, which I quite regularly did, I would get ping pong balls delivered to the house. It was okay, though, because I had several sons who were in college at the time, and for some reason, college students must have been really big time into ping pong. I don't know. But they would take all those ping pong balls right away. So now what I want to do is actually order the thing. So I'm going to click on this Selector Playground, come click on this Add the Cart, and there's the Click Me. Click Me is my pun on Kick Me. So whenever I use Click Me, it would make it red. You're using the Stephen Krug Don't Make Me Think strategy. So let's go back in here. So this is a way you can go to the button as well. I could have gone to the it's going too quick. Could have gone to the search button as well instead of doing the enter up here. So now it adds it to the cart, and oh, wait a minute, I can't see the thing. And one of the issues with Cypress is that if Cypress can't see if it's not visible on the page, you're not going to be able to click it in your tests. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say sci.viewport, because I want to make it wider. So this makes it real nice to test for small devices. And not only that, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to say sci.pause, which is a new thing I actually just found out about. So it starts to run and it pauses execution there, which is kind of handy so you can step through it. Next, and I could do here, which is going to run through everything. And finish. So you can see it changed the viewport. If I resize the screen, that thing's going to shrink up. It does it all for you. It's still the same viewport. It's just going to be illegible because the font's going to be too small. So now what I want to do is I want to look at this value here. So I'm going to hit the playground again. And look at them here. And there's at $5, so I'm going to copy him. And there's all kinds of assertions you can do. Any of the assertions that's in Chai, you're going to be able to do with this. So I want the $5. And it's going to run through the whole test. Oh, I have the pause on. Those errors are still happening. We're just catching it, so it's ignoring them. So it ran through the whole way. And just for giggles, I mean, a Selenium demo would never do this because I'm connecting through this is an older, of a very slow connection. Oh, thank you. Okay, so let me fix that. Just pause again. I'm going to delete that thing. And cancel that. And the last thing I want to do for this portion of the demo is I'm going to say Cypress Run. And this is going to run in the background, so this is what you're actually going to run in your CI server. And it saves the state and it creates that video that you can fill up a cooler of beer and go to the drive-in and watch your videos. Now, one of the problems I have with this is it's so cool it has these videos, but it compresses them. So, you know, if it takes 10 minutes to run your test, your compressed video is maybe 2-3 minutes long. So I wish it was slower because this is a great way of documenting how to use a site. And it's worked well for me for the 9 to 12 apps that I have now because it's documented that for me. It documents for other people. I've actually been using it lately to show what I've done. My supervisor is not as available lately as I'd like him to be. And so to show him some of the different things I did, instead of having him check out the code, run the code, understand how to invoke it, I just show him run a Cypress test.
Three really quick questions. First one is if you're doing cross-browser testing, does it emulate your browser types? IE, I think, is tough.
Yeah, and Cypress does not today support, it's a statement direction to support IE or Firefox. I think Firefox is coming real soon, but it does not today support IE, so it doesn't. IE is on the roadmap too.
Second question was, I know it's running in browser, but does it, the stuff you do test is a lot of Windows moving, so Windows positioning and size rule and sort of thing. Does it reach out and understand the geometry of Windows running?
If you can do it with JavaScript, it's a non-issue because you can always manipulate that yourself. The viewport that I showed you is just for what you can see. So I don't think it has an issue whatsoever the sizing of your screens. I would put tests in there to say, hey, what's the size of this now? And you can, because you can do it with JavaScript, you can test that. Okay. So now I want to do a routing demo. One of the real powerful things about Cypress is that you can manipulate the routes. This application is a backbone application. Backbone aficionados here. It's a backbone application, and it's front end for data that's made accessible on another completely application service, and of course it's all a JSON layer. So it was hard as nuts to create Cypress tests as the dynamic data. So what I needed to do was stub the fixtures. So if you look at this application, it has these integration tests. And then it has these JSON fixtures. So it's crazy easy to stub your remote requests. So if I go to the support and look at the commands, this is a standard file, and you can write custom commands. Let me increase that a little bit. So you can write custom commands, and down here I have this route for login. I'm going to test that now. And actually, before I run it, I'm going to say debugger here. And of course, it ran right away. And the debugger only, as you know, will only work. This is really handy if you want to debug your own JavaScript and it's hard to set up the infrastructure to get to the point that you want to debug. So you put debugger in your own code. You open up your Cypress test, make sure the window's open, and then you can debug. It's a nice way to get right to your JavaScript code that you wrote that you're debugging. I do the same thing with the Ruby and Rails side. I'll put the debugger, go to a point where I want, and then I can go back over and have debugger code set up. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to the network, and so I make sure those are saved. And let's rerun this. Here's my debugger. I set the debugger there so I could enable the save of requests. And what I want to look for is this request to get login. So there it is. And it says name Baggins, or Bilbo Baggins is one of our folks, I guess. So if I go here, there's Baggins. So what's happened here is it stubbed the request. And that's real powerful because, stubbing is more than just the ability to stub it with fixtures. You can also just stub it just because you want to wait on it. You know, one of the slowest things for testing that I've had is not necessarily the rendering, but going to another site and pulling data back. That site may be slow. So what you can do is you can set up, it's real simple. So you don't have to use this background, you know, the command structure. You just say in your test, you say site at server. So you're telling Cypress, hey, I want to watch network requests coming in back. And then you set up a route, and you give the URL for your route. And then you can say as, which gives it a name for that. And then in your code, if I split this, and if I search for get login, I know where it is. It's right here anyways. And it says wait, aught get login. All your as's have an aught in front of it. And what will happen is it's going to wait until that thing comes back. So now what I'm going to do is instead of using the fixture, I'm going to go to the live site, which happens to be local. I'm going to run it again, and I want to clear my network. How much time do I have, by the way? Oh, I'm done? Okay. If I run this again, it's going to actually go out, and it's going to retrieve the actual value of the dynamic JSON from the other site. Let me go back here, routing demo. Bundle tools, Mocha, Chai, Sign-On, those are things that have been around for years, and they've bundled those. I have a list of best practices. I guess we can make this available somewhere at the site. The docs are just fabulous. And that's the end of the presentation. I don't feel too bad about those best practices and stuff. That was just noise. I really just wanted to give you a demo and talk to you about the coolness of Cypress. So this is the end of the presentation. It's easy to get started. It's fun to write tests, and it's really straightforward to debug.